Hello, welcome to today's Search Engine Journal webinar. I'm Heather Campbell, VP of Marketing and Sales here at SEJ. Excited that you have chosen to spend this time with us. And I am joined by Robert Cooney, VP of Client Strategy, and Kyle Harris, Director of Local Optimization. Both of these gentlemen are from DAC. Robert, Kyle, thanks for joining us.
Thank you. Happy to be here.
Awesome. Well, while I go over some quick housekeeping, I would love it if our attendees could use the chat. Let us know where you're coming in from today. I am based out of West Virginia. Kyle, Robert, what about you both?
I am in New York
and Toronto.
Nice. So we got a little mixed here for everybody today. We are going to be talking about how AI is rewriting local search and how multi-location brands can win. We know that it's tough out there right now, but it's nothing different. It's just the same constant chaos that search has always been. So I'm excited to see what you have to bring to the table here today. For our attendees out there, if you need closed captioning, it's the little CC in the top right of your screen. Give that a click. We do have some polls for today. We will have some Q&A at the end of the presentation. So if you have any questions for Kyle or Robert, please leave those in the Q&A tab. If you see a question that you like, you'll see a little thumbs up feature. You can give it an up vote, and that tells us that it's important to you all out there. So we'll do our best to get those answered first. Before you leave today's webinar, we would love it if you can take our post-webinar survey. It just takes a couple seconds, and really it's just to let us know how today's event went for you and what we can do a little bit better in the future. Gives an opportunity. If there's any topics that you want to hear, you can leave those in there. And you'll find some emojis at the bottom of the screen. So if you're liking something, give us a little laugh, a little celebration, but don't go crazy. We have had to turn them off on people before for spamming them. So, there's a balance here. All right. With that, I'm going to turn it over. Robert, Kyle, they are all yours.
Thanks so much, Heather. And thanks everyone for joining us. I was just so excited to see all of the different place names flying around in the chat because I think that's just so appropriate for our multi-location theme here today. So in terms of what we're going to be covering over the next roughly 40 minutes, and then we'll open it up to your questions. We're going to start with how AI is changing the Google experience. So AI is massively rewriting the face of the SERPs. We'll cover what those changes are. We'll then get into some of the alternative local search experiences. So these are the beyond Google sorts of things, like what's happening for local brands in ChatGPT, in Perplexity, in social search. We'll then sort of tie all of that together strategically. So we'll talk about how a multi-location business should be thinking of an enterprise to local strategy that really integrates all of these new viewpoints into what's changing and how you need to show up in order to be successful. And if you bear with us through all of that sort of theoretical and philosophical stuff, we'll get into the really good stuff about local optimization tactics and how you can make a meaningful difference here for your brand. So that will be the point where Kyle takes over and amps up the energy. Finally, we'll come back to preparing for the future of agentic local search. So we're really just starting to see the first breaths of this technology take shape, and it's giving us some interesting ideas on what the future might look like. So we want to have a little bit of a discussion about that, and hopefully that will dovetail nicely into some discussion and taking your questions. So we will start with the Google experience, but before we do, I believe we have a poll queued up for you.
Here we go.
Sorry for that moment of silence. Typically, I come over and say, that should bounce out for everybody, but the poll took over my screen and I couldn't get to my unmute button. I'm sorry. So, okay, so that poll has dropped for everybody, and here you go. You should be able to see those results.
Oh, well, that was fast. Okay, so it looks like losing traffic from fewer clicks is the thing most people are concerned about, which doesn't really surprise me too much. Oh, and I just have to dismiss this before I can move on. There we go. All right. And so that makes sense because the AI overviews, this is really the focus of a lot of the discussion when we talk about how AI is changing the Google experience. Everyone's seeing these now. They're appearing at the top of the SERP. They're pushing all of the other content down. They're providing, in a lot of cases, these great synthesized responses to a complex question. And so they're resulting in this sort of zero-click search experience where you maybe get what you need to know without having to go to anyone's website, right? So that traffic loss has been a really important consideration. And we've fielded a lot of questions, especially from multi-location brands, about where exactly this is costing them traffic. And is this maybe even displacing the Maps pack, which used to be providing a lot of high-intent local traffic? So we set up a study around investigating this type of thing specifically, and really just seeing if we could gain a better understanding of how different types of search queries, different types of user intent would determine with any measure of consistency which SERP features showed up. So what triggers these AI overviews, what still triggers a Maps pack, all of that sort of thing. And our methodology for this was, we started with a bunch of different industry verticals and a bunch of different seed terms within them. So if we're thinking about auto services as one example, oil change might be a seed term that's kind of at the root of a thing that they do. And we wanted to intentionally morph each of these seed terms into a bunch of different queries. So you might look for the cost of oil change. You might look for oil change near me, oil change coupon, maybe the best oil change. Maybe you're explicitly localizing, so it's oil change Boston. Maybe you're not looking for service, but it's how to do an oil change, and that's probably going to generate something different. So we used a custom-built GPT to apply all of these morphs across our seed list and just give us a pretty good testing ground to see what the SERPs return for each of these things across the different terms and different industries. So you can read all of those results in our actual white paper, how we did the study, what exactly we learned. But just a quick summary of this. The near me searches still triggered the Maps pack 100% of the time. So that's great. Google seems to be recognizing that explicitly local intent and saying the best way to serve that up is a map with a business directory. When they were question terms like how, what, why sort of prefixes, those were the ones that were much more likely to generate the AI overviews. And that makes sense. It's more clearly an informational term. What was interesting to me was these things almost never showed up together in the same SERP. Across all of the data we looked at, there was less than 1% of cases where these features overlapped. In the cases where they did, it was the AI overview on top and the Maps pack down below. And this would happen for some searches that were maybe a little bit ambiguous in nature. So certain types of automotive services, maybe you can't tell if someone is looking for a business that delivers that service, or they're looking to learn more about how and why you would perform that service on your car. So those were the types of cases where there was a bit of a gray area. We also looked at the types of content that were being cited in the AI overviews, and there were some interesting learnings there. Probably the most notable one is when people were doing these how-to types of searches. Those AIOs tended to surface stepwise content. So things that were really clearly structured as being step 1, step 2, step 3. Another interesting observation with the morphing of these search terms was just if we took the root word and pluralized it, that made it a little bit more likely to trigger an AI overview, probably because a pluralization is being interpreted as give me a category overview as opposed to taking me to a specific type of product. Okay, so what about AI mode? AI mode is really Google's answer to these emerging experiences from ChatGPT, from Perplexity, where it makes search results much more conversational. So you can actually have a chat with it. It's not that you just submit your search term and you get an AI overview and you're done. You can have a conversation with the results. This ends up being a totally different product, totally different experience. We're seeing a lot of evidence that the way the information is sourced and cited is fundamentally different with AI mode. So perhaps even the model training is much more important than some of the frequently updating website signals. So really important to get a handle on this, and it warrants further study as this is rolling out. But I just wanted to show a really interesting example of how this can be applied for a local business-specific search. So my favorite cocktail bar closed down recently, and I wanted to ask AI mode to find a similar place for me. And so this bar was a literary theme, and they used to make these really great inventive cocktails that were themed for a specific book. And it picked up on that nuance. I didn't have to tell it that. It got that from the search and just said, okay, so you might be interested in the writer's room bar, or you might be interested in the library bar. So I had to clarify for it. I'm not here to read. I just want the best cocktails. And it preserved all of the context of that original search and surfaced a different answer. It came back with civil liberties. Now, I know this place, and that's a great answer. That's probably the next best place that's still open. So really interesting that I was able to converse with the search results and make them better and shape them to my liking. Now, I also notice if you look at the right rail here, some of the sources that are being cited are pretty unconventional for Google, right? Historically, they would promote their own places listings from their own business directory to answer a search. But now we're starting to see Yelp being cited more. Now we're starting to see OpenTable being cited. So we can speculate about why this is happening. I think maybe it has something to do with how Google has come under fire recently for antitrust considerations. There's probably a bit of a conscious effort to be just more open and neutral about the types of sources that are appearing here, rather than doing as much self-dealing as they've done in the past. That's just some speculation on why this is happening. But in any case, I think it's pretty interesting to look at what these sources tend to be. Okay, so now we're going to get into the alternative local search experiences. But before we do that, I believe we again have another poll.
I'm going to have to start taking myself off of mute before I hit to launch the poll. All right, let's see. Here we go. So results are coming in. We've got, there, it's a little more even. So about 25% saying TikTok and Reddit, with almost 50% saying still Google first. Everything else is second.
Oh, and that one's getting bigger. So yeah, still Google first. Cool. Okay. All right. So I just wanted to highlight first how ChatGPT tends to deal with local business searches. So I asked, I'm looking for a great seafood restaurant in Boston. I love shellfish. So I get a maps listing, and this is good because it's dealing with the proximity side of the equation. But it also comes back with a quick comparison table where it's talking about the vibe and the highlights of these different places and what they're actually best for. And that content is sourced not from the maps element, but from rich sources of descriptive content across the web. So I find it really interesting that you're getting this great synthesized result that brings together data from different sources. You've got the distance element, you've got the more qualitative aspect of things, and it's putting that together for you in one result. So that's great. You can understand why this is starting to take some traffic away from traditional Google experiences, because it's just an awesome result if you're looking for a restaurant. How's this sort of thing playing out in Perplexity? Perplexity has a places screen, which is dedicated to this local business type of functionality. And it's very visual. So you have these great large size image thumbnails on one side and the map showing up on the other side of the screen. So this is a really good view if you're looking for a local business and trying to get a sense for what they look like. Interestingly, they're pulling up this reserve button. And if you click that, that's fully integrating through their OpenTable partnership. So you can actually make the reservation with that restaurant without having to leave this experience. And so you can imagine how this is going to give rise to more of an agentic experience eventually, where you can just maybe chat with it to book that table for you and not have to click through this. Or if they're going to integrate more types of sort of service APIs from across different types of businesses, so you can actually just get your work done without ever leaving that interface. Okay, we're also seeing a really extreme generational shift in the mentality around social search and social searches being the first port of call when people are looking for information. It doesn't happen so much with the baby boomer generation. They're still very much Google first, and they're experiencing the insertion of AI and social platforms through the SERP features that Google is injecting into the more traditional SERPs. When you look at Gen X and Millennial, much more mixed in terms of the search behavior. You'll see people going to different experiences depending on exactly what they're trying to do, because there's this very solid understanding of just what type of experience is going to best serve me in this moment for this purpose. And when you look at Gen Z, they're the much most likely generation to be going to social search first. So actually initiating a search on a platform like TikTok. And the reason this is happening conceptually is because social proof is overtaking the brand's own hype in how consumer decisions are influenced. And it makes sense. We're also inundated with advertising, and we've come to be distrustful of what brands say about themselves. And it's just so easy to go and crowdsource an opinion from 1,000 other people who have actually experienced this brand and have something to say about it. So this is changing the behavior where people are going first to look for those real human perspectives. And if you look at an example of TikTok acting as a search engine, you can see why that's so appealing. If you're looking for something like the best ice cream shop locally, to get these types of highly visual results, that's probably much more relevant than just seeing pins on a map. And you're getting to view these real user perspectives of people enjoying these creations. So how does TikTok localize? The video content is tagged to a place. So that could be a specific business, or it could just be a city. And so if all of the content is locally tagged, then through geolocating the user, they can match the two together, right? They know what city you're in, and they know what city or what exact place the content is about. So this is the way that they're driving local discovery. And even though they don't have a full-fledged business directory in the same way that Google does, they're starting to test attaching reviews into this comment stream. So you might see appearing the ability to give a star review to the business that is tagged in this sort of post. So TikTok, I would say, is very much evolving their local search functionality, but the basics are here to just make it a great experience for people looking to discover and talk about a local business. Reddit is, it's interesting. So many people called this out as important in the poll we just did. Very much on the mark. It's increasingly influential for a variety of different reasons. We've seen a more than 400% increase in the top 3 SERP positions in Google being taken up by Reddit listings over the last 3 years. So just massive growth in Google prioritizing sending traffic into Reddit. We know from social monitoring that about 50% of purchase-related conversations are taking place in Reddit. So if someone is looking to engage with a product or service, this is a place where they're very likely to be going to crowdsource those opinions. Reddit is also the most cited single source across the different AI models. So it's very influential in what LLMs think about your business based on what people are saying about it in Reddit. And through partnerships with OpenAI and Google, Reddit's full text is available for model training. So we've got Reddit showing up in search results. We've got Reddit as being a place that people just go to execute their searches in the first place. And we've got Reddit training models. Across those 3 things, its influence is just astounding right now. So what does it look like when someone executes a local search in Google and a Reddit thread gets shown? If I look for best place to buy running shoes in Boston, yeah, I've got the maps pack across the top. That makes sense. Then I've got Boston Magazine. Then the very next thing is a Reddit listing. And it's actually taking up more screen real estate than that Boston Magazine because it's got the deeper links to different threads, and it's got the top answers being surfaced into this special experience. So you have this great deal of visibility around Marathon Sports, which is a business that the Redditors have called out inside the threads, right? So that's really interesting. You might not even have to click through, but Marathon Sports is getting this great visibility because they're being talked about within the threads. Now, if I run that same search within Reddit itself, you can see that all of these threads that are being surfaced are within r/Boston. So this is the Reddit approach to localization. It's based on the forum itself being localized. So businesses need to think about, how do I want to participate in my local Reddit communities? What's the most authentic and helpful way to show up here and hopefully get some people talking about me as a result of that helpfulness. Okay, so with all of this in mind, we've got a lot of different places where we need to show up and create content. We used to think about SEO as being a relationship between Google and the brand's website. I think this is no longer true. I think businesses need to consider the distributed content footprint across their own website, across all of the different social platforms of note. And there's this relationship where Google search and the various models are referring traffic into these platforms. You may click through to the website, you may click through to a social platform, you may click through to Reddit. And in turn, all of these platforms are influencing how these models think about and represent the business. So there's a lot more things to get right. You need to have a content strategy that covers all of this. But for the brands that can do this effectively, they can create for themselves really a virtuous loop with this sort of thing. So how do we know what types of content to create? I think looking at the SERP features is still one really great way to guide this. So if you know what thematic topics are most important for your brand to cover, you can look at the SERP features that show up for that. Is it video heavy? Is it surfacing a lot of AI overviews? Is it surfacing a lot of discussions and forums? And just based on the SERP features that are showing up, you have some clues as to the type of content you need to create. But it's also really important that the content creation is guided by an audience understanding. So if you can build richer personas or audience insights and really do the effort to map that consumer journey as people are thinking through a potential purchase, then you know exactly which platforms are going to be most influential to them and which ones they're maybe going to go to directly to execute their searches in platform rather than in Google. And you don't have to take on full responsibility to creating all of this content yourself. I think engaging with local creators is a great way to help build this footprint because they already come with their own local audiences and the built-in credibility. And they're just creating the types of social content that is more likely to be surfaced in these much more dynamic SERPs. Okay, so if we put all of this together from a strategic standpoint, how does a multi-location business win in this landscape? You have to monitor the platforms that matter because they are changing. Google itself is changing. The experiences are radically different, especially with the emergence of AI mode. We're going to see Google progressively lose traffic to alternative search experiences like ChatGPT, Perplexity, and social search. We need to understand the sources of training data. So as these models are becoming more important, how are they understanding what a business is all about and what kind of content do we need to create and where do we need to participate socially in order to put our best foot forward and influence that? We need to understand the audience. What are they trying to do as they're transacting across this journey? And how can we show up in the right places to be most helpful to the end consumer? We don't necessarily have to build all this content on our own. We can leverage local creators to help. It's a great way to get that footprint and to be authentic. And finally, we don't want to sleep on the local search fundamentals. It's still absolutely crucial to get the data structured correctly so that the engines and LLMs know where your business is and what it's all about. And so this is where Kyle's going to take over and get us into how we execute on some of these fundamentals.
Thank you. Thank you. All right. So we should have at this point done a good job of kind of overviewing what Google looks like from a, AI landscape, also some of these other, more important or more emerging platforms like Perplexity and Reddit and ChatGPT. What we want to make sure you also get out of today is really some, hard and fast best practices, things to do, make sure that you're getting right. So we really wanted to get into some more of the tactical things. I'm most certainly going to get into that in this section, but I also want to shape a little bit how things are changing and what's kind of staying the same. So it gives some context as to why we're recommending what we are. So, before we get into that, it's important to understand what kind of local optimization actually is. And again, this is all about you've done branding, you've done all these other things, and it's now the last leg of the journey. You have people that are looking to get a service or buy a product. They're at the last leg of that consumer mile. And it's really about making sure you have a strategy to essentially capture that bottom of the funnel. So we've talked a lot about change. Probably everyone's sick and tired of how much is actually changing right now. But I think it is important to actually see what is different in this new versus, post world. And I think by outlining some of these things, we'll actually understand why it is that we're saying that we should do some of these tactics that are coming up. So the first thing that's changing, and Robert gave a lot of examples of this already, is that query length is most certainly changing. So where people would generally do, between 3 and 6 types of keywords, into a single search like coffee near me, you were way more likely in an AI environment to include way more detail, really refine that, ask additional questions. So it's way more conversational. It's a lot longer. There's a lot more information for AI to essentially, analyze before giving you a result. And that's really a big difference. So in terms of creating content and all of those things, if there's a lot more, intent in these queries, you can be building content to capture some of that stuff. The other thing that's most certainly changing is essentially how queries are handled in terms of search. So historically, it's always been you type in, a query, and essentially Google tries to match that to content it has. Now, in this new, AI mode, there's things like, hey, you type in a single query like coffee near me, it kicks off multiple searches, right? Looking for coffee near me, and also best coffee near me, and coffee near me with Wi-Fi, and coffee near. There's a bunch of different things that it essentially infers and looks for. So one search is actually way more than one search now when you look at all of these combined results. That's most certainly something that is new. The other thing that's happening here is you used to write essentially content on your website to try and be relevant to different queries, thinking about the page. Now there's a bit of a shift from that standpoint, and you have to individually think about all of the content sections of a page, because AI can pull not from a page, they can pull from pieces of a page to synthesize into these answers that are ultimately getting in front of consumers. So again, page versus kind of this like chunk relevance is very much something that's new. The other thing that's really new here is, SEOs, around the world would essentially make this joke that if you want to rank better, you just get links, and more links. But that's actually changing a little bit. I'm not saying that links are not important from an AI standpoint. They're not as much, wherein content quality and user engagement, brand reputation is playing out a lot more in these like popularity signals. It's not all just as simple as links, and more links. And finally, probably the biggest change, or the easiest one to actually see, is this ranked list versus single, synthesized answers thing. And what that means is, from an SEO standpoint, we are very used to seeing a business ranking number 1, number 2, number 3. You get this kind of like nicely neat stacked order of businesses or results in an old query. In an AI answer, you might just get a paragraph or broken into different sections. So it's not as easy to really understand where in that presentation layer your brand actually shows up. In what position are you? Is that even nomenclature that we should still be continuing to use? It becomes a lot more complicated to essentially say, like, who won this search? Who is the best, represented in this type of, presentation? So we're going to have to come up with kind of new ways to describe this and different kind of essentially KPIs to track as we start having these conversations. So that goes over kind of what has changed. The good news is what's staying the same is pretty much everything else. So I think that one of the big takeaways from this is there is a lot changing in the space with all of this fragmented search and different platforms. And, how do I stay on top of all this stuff? Underlying stuff from all of this really seems to be staying the same. So there is some positive news through all of this. So essentially knowing, all of this, what should you be doing to essentially capitalize this? What are the technical elements that any brand should be caring about if you essentially want to have your phones ringing, your cash register going off, and you getting the KPIs you care about? And we put together a bit of a checklist here. So this is the AI-driven local search discovery checklist. I'll go through these in more detail individually, but essentially it's these items that brands should be thinking about and making sure you have good answers to. So number one is foundational data accuracy. So if you don't have a good and easy way to essentially get your data out to the places that need it, whether that's paid search, partnerships, agencies, vendors, whatever that, deliver it, where you are and how, you essentially manage that underlying foundational accuracy is incredibly important. It becomes even more important when you're a multi-location brand that might have hundreds, thousands, or tens of thousands of locations. So again, if you want to be staying ahead of AI and you don't have a good grasp on your own data, you're asking the wrong questions, and you should essentially look in the house of, hey, how do we get this into a better place so we can then move on to the other things on this checklist? Once your data is in a good place, then it's all about making sure that it's rich and structured for success in all of these AI platforms. So you should be creating extremely detailed location-specific landing pages, adding on differentiators for your business, unique selling propositions, making sure that technically your pages are built sound, their schema, they're easily digestible, they're conversational in nature. All of that is going to be, paramount here. The other thing, and honestly, this might be something that everyone cared about, but I have been shocked so far just how important reviews and reputation management are in this kind of AI environment. And I think it's because AIs love reading things and reviews are just straight text. It is such a wonderful thing, from an element to understand ranking and sentiment and all of those things. AI absolutely loves this. The average, local query, AI is going to spit something back based off of trusted review platforms, or I took a look at, sentiment, whatever the case may be. So reviews and reputation management are unbelievably critical in this environment. So brands should have a way to monitor all of your reviews, both first party where you're asking, consumers for surveys and stuff like that, as well as on, major tech platforms like Google, if you get Facebook recommendations and stuff like that. You should have a process for asking for reviews, things like QR codes. And, when you have to give someone a receipt, if you put a QR code on a pizza box, like whatever the case may be, you guys know your business, better than I do. But you do need to figure out the easiest way to ask everyone for these reviews. And then you really need to understand how to respond to these, right? It's customer service 101 to essentially talk to your customers. Responding to reviews falls under that. And then there's also a way to mine all of the review data as it exists out online and making sure that you're injecting those learnings back into your business. Getting a 1-star review is not the worst thing ever. If you learn from it, contact that consumer, fix their problem, and then hopefully actually get them to change their, review at a later point. All of this is solvable, but you need to have a real strategy that essentially goes over these 4 things. The other thing that multi-location brands need to do, and really just any business, is make sure that your local listings and really just coverage in the ecosystem is really, done solidly. So you need to make sure that everywhere online has your, name, address, and phone number properly managed. I'm not talking every site around the world. I'm for sure not talking about that, but really, places that essentially get traffic, industry niche things that are important to your business. Any big major tech platform, you do need to make sure that the directory information that it has about your business is completely aligned and that you've filled out all of the additional fields like photos and services and categories and all of the other fields in there. Your hours of operation is critical for this. And then have a process to monitor for, updates to your listing. You should be publishing fresh content into all of this and pushing it out to the ecosystem. All of that is, nothing terribly new in part of this, but is absolutely powering all of these AI experiences and platforms. So you should be doubling down on these types of initiatives. The next thing is taking a look at all of your content and making sure that you're writing it in a style that is friendly and or easy to be included in these conversational queries. And what I mean by that is things like frequently asked questions. It's a question and answer format. It makes it extremely easy for that content to be essentially moved into these synthesized AI answers. Absolutely pay attention to long tail content, right? Mining your quick search query results for question-based keywords to essentially produce content for your websites to capture that makes all the sense in the world to be doing. Again, not like the craziest and new thing here, but absolutely paramount to be successful. The other thing is we absolutely can't forget about just the actual technical makeup of your websites and the performance signals from them. So loading fast, making sure that they're accessible, making sure that there's strong internal linking and indexing and crawlability. SEO kind of 101 here stuff absolutely still stands, which we should have all been doing for years at this point, but still absolutely matter from an AI standpoint. The other thing that's happening in here, and Robert gave a list of different places that this actually plays out, but just visuals and multimedia optimization. If you're a multi-location brand, it's kind of worth its weight in gold to source all this local photography to be used in your local marketing efforts, whether that be email marketing or in your listings, producing unique content for local pages. That photography does capture unique and different things, and ensuring that you have that asset and are leveraging it in all of the places that actually matter are important. And having a plan to refresh these visuals frequently is very important. If you're a restaurant, if you do kitchen remodeling, whatever the case may be, is having fresh completed projects, having new dishes, having new products or services that are launching, you can absolutely think about, what do I visually need to make it clear to my customers that I'm a good solution for these things? Absolutely critical, and every business should be thinking about this. And then finally, once you get through all of those things, you sit back and you essentially see what you've built here, and you continue to refine it. You find out which things are impacting your business a little bit more. Do you ask for, another Google review? Do you ask for, your customers to leave you a TikTok video? These are all things that, depending upon where you are in this process, can help dictate kind of what it is that you should prioritize and essentially push. But being flexible with all of this, because it's going to constantly change, is also really important as well. So that goes over essentially, the tactical, that the AI kind of like search checklist of what multi-location brands, really any brand, should be doing. What we also wanted to give you here is a little bit of a peek into the future and kind of get you a little bit excited and potentially a little bit scared for how much all of this could be changing, and tests that Google has actually already gotten in market as it relates to this. So I'm not sure if everyone's seen this. I saw that, when this essentially started, we were asking people where they're from. The answers were all over the globe. If you're not in the US, I don't think you would have seen this test already, but Google was legitimately putting this big blue button in local packs that were saying, hey, have AI check pricing. So for things like pet grooming or oil changes or, something at a salon, you could actually figure out what the price would be for those services. So how that was essentially working was Google would ask you, like, hey, what type of pet do you have? What type of car do you have? What type of service are you looking for? And you would essentially fill out an RFP, a request for proposal. Here's all my contact information. Here's the service that I'm looking for. Google have AI call these local businesses and essentially get pricing and availability and everything else that I would need, so that I don't actually have to do this. It's essentially having an assistant call on your behalf to check pricing and other important pieces of details. So at this point, we'll do a poll number 3. I'm curious to see what you guys think about this initiative.
All right, that should have popped out for everybody. I'll give this a couple seconds to come through. At 100%, that's my answer, just in case we're not clear. So we are creating biases when we push these polls. All right, there you guys go. About 67% are saying price transparency. Oh, look at that flop. All right, So 47% losing emotional brand influence in decision making. And second being operational readiness.
It is certainly scary. Pretty much every one of these answers is not one that we would be super happy about.
Yeah.
But if we continue, really, like, number one, the way that, we're looking at this and kind of some of the questions that we're asking is, what are the operational implications as something like this rolls out globally across all categories, maybe on more than, just one platform? And the answer is, how will call volumes increase? Are we as a business prepared to do these? Do I have to change, do I have to hire new staff? Do I have to train my staff differently? How are we going to measure all of this, and what KPIs are important when it's, machines calling nonstop? Do you need essentially AI to answer your phones because they ring off the hook because every query on Google for a service related business generates 100 phone calls? There's some really complicated things to work through here, but really what we're looking at, the bigger picture on all of this is, number one, this might be positive if proximity just does not matter as much and it's easier to understand this information. It might be harder, right, to show up for what you're used to, but it might actually open up more of a geographic region for your business, in the fact that, it's a lot easier to contact multiple businesses to essentially get quotes on all of these things. A challenge to that is, does price transparency create a real race to the bottom? Are you going to be hurt substantially if you, offer a superior product, but at a higher price point, and you can't explain why it is you're not the cheapest option? All of that goes out the window. The poll captured that pretty, fantastically. Having conversations, going over custom pricing and understand how, you come to these numbers is important. You guys all, run businesses. You can understand how important that is. And essentially, finally, do brands lose power if smaller players have the best solution? So, ranking number one on Google used to be great. Now, if you rank in position 15, but you're still getting a phone call and getting your pricing in front of consumers, does that matter as much, right? And there's a real leveling of that, and or just a changing of the guard if visibility in search platforms does not actually equal who actually gets the leads or in front of consumers at the same rate as they used to. So again, some really interesting, scary, depending upon how you look at this stuff, but just a massive change from where we were and are. And it's kind of interesting to see where we kind of move this forward from here. So that was essentially what we wanted to, to go through today. I hope that was enjoyable for everyone, and at least informational and educational. And I know we saved some time here at the end to walk through some questions, so we can get into all of that stuff right now.
Awesome. That was great stuff. Thank you both for sharing. We had some great chats, people sharing tools they're using and everything. So there was a question from Hal. He asked if the white paper that Robert mentioned at the beginning is available for review. And I am actually going to drop that in the chat. So Hal, there is your link to that white paper. Matthew, it's nice to see you. We do have the same last name, but Matthew and I are not related. And there is a link to all of DAC's white papers as well. So I wanted to make sure that we got that out to you all. Okay, let's get started because we've got some great questions here. So William asks, what are your thoughts on creating near me pages? Are they valuable at all?
Yeah, so I'll go with just yes. It's probably more truthful. It depends, right? So like if you're creating near me pages and you don't have other pages that are more important than those, I'd probably do that. But yeah, near me queries still absolutely happen. If Google didn't care about near me, it wouldn't be part of the autocomplete so often. That to me is just concrete. Look into your own metrics when you build them. I guarantee these will essentially get you some level of traffic. Yes, near me pages still work. Should you move all of your pages to near me content and every page is optimized towards near me? No, But I think making and looking into where you're getting near me traffic and essentially trying to capture more of that as an overall strategy is absolutely spot on.
I know we talked about a Reddit and a few tactics, and we've got quite a few Reddit questions, so I'll try to bundle them together. But how would you suggest to best utilize Reddit for clients as a tactic?
Gotcha. So I'll answer this interestingly. So the number one thing to do is get on Reddit and actually find out how it works. Because most of the time I feel like I get asked this question, people don't understand what Reddit is. So to use it, go on there, create a username, join some subreddits, read these things. It's essentially an online forum that people can just start having conversations back and forth, and there's a rich visual layer of it. So understanding that it's a bit of a community forum, the way that you can best utilize Reddit is find where people are talking about things that make sense to your business, hop in and try to be unbelievably helpful. So if you do kitchen remodeling, join the kitchen remodeling subreddit and answer people's questions around how do you find a professional? How do you choose different finishes? Jump in and be professional, essentially build your brand. And eventually there will be questions like, hey, I'm in this area looking for someone. Do you have recommendations? And if you've earned the right to join that conversation on Reddit, you can start to get leads from that. So it's way more of a long play to do this. It's not as simple as, enter your credit card and Reddit will start giving you leads. It's not that. It's way more like joining a Facebook group or people talking about a product or service. You have to earn the right to essentially inject yourself into those conversations.
Yeah, and what Kyle's saying about helpfully answering questions, that's so critical. And by contrast, what you can't do is just start spamming overtly commercial offers into threads where people are just talking about how to do something, right? So that's where a lot of businesses fail, is they might even get moderated out of the forum on their first few posts because they're just spamming this offer and it makes no sense to the community. So it is about showing up with that spirit of helpfulness. And if you want to do something that's a little bit more overtly commercial, there's all kinds of great paid media placements in Reddit as well, including keyword-driven ones. So you can run an ad based on keywords that appear in the conversation thread. And that's your opportunity to say, if you're looking for this type of thing, just click through and buy from me.
Right. And the should I advertise on Reddit thing comes down to what are your other options? Right. If you are, a local service business and you're not running LSAs, no, I would do that for Reddit. If you're maxing out other things and Reddit's something you want to test your media dollars on, yeah, absolutely. But it should be part of a bigger and broader question of where should I run media? And if Reddit makes sense, then definitely do it.
Yeah. Also, AMAs are a great piece of content that tends to have a long shelf life. So if you have an expert coming in and answering people's questions as part of a Reddit AMA, that's a great opportunity for a brand to create something that then gets referred to later by other threads. So I saw a really interesting statistic that a huge percentage of the Reddit threads, I forget the exact number, but they're showing up in searches today and being constantly resurfaced as the answers to people's questions. But a lot of that content is more than a year old. So once you initiate these threads or answer questions in an AMA, that has real staying power. And you want to do this in a coordinated way. So you get your real expert together to host this AMA. You maybe use some of the paid media formats to promote that AMA. So you have really strong participation. And then that content lives forever in the platform. And you think about how to further amplify that. And it becomes a great SEO asset as well.
Good.
That was great answer there. So while we're still on Reddit, let's take this one from Taylor. Thoughts on finding creators, Redditors who have positively reviewed us on their platforms and ask them to also cross-post on Google profiles?
Yeah. So posting on Google profiles, there are like updates from consumers. Most of the Google content that a third party can put on your profile would be a review. But yes, absolutely, getting that is important. Local guides are nowhere near as important as finding like content creators on Instagram, actual real influencers on these social platforms. So I would, if you're working with creators and Redditors and or content creators on other platforms, getting them to leave you a Google review is fine. It's just nowhere near as impactful as keeping them on those user-generated platforms in general. Google has user-generated content, but it's not primarily focused on that. It's way more a map and what's local and the services and products and all of that stuff.
Sarah asks, and I know that I saw you answer this in the main chat, actually, Kyle, but for everybody, and so it gives you a chance to kind of expand on it. All different channels feel overwhelming for a small business. So how do we do it all? Where should we prioritize?
Yeah. So, you do have to be strategic here, right? So, if you're in a niche type of thing, right, I think the weirdest thing I ever did SEO for was crime scene cleanup, which was really interesting. And there's not that many businesses that do this. So, straight out of the gate, you're in a, non-competitive industry. You can take a Google focus. It's going to be decently easy to start ranking quickly for queries that, matter to you on Google. If you are, opening up a law firm and you're trying to rank number one for, DUIs, it's going to be a much harder thing. So as a small business, essentially understanding what keywords you essentially want to go after, I think will dictate a little bit for how you should prioritize them. If I have to paint with an unbelievably broad brush, as an SMB, I would absolutely focus on Google. But I think there does come a point of what you're trying to rank for. And if it's incredibly difficult and you're going up against brands that have been around for, 30 years and have such a leg up on you, I might look at some of these more emerging platforms and say, hey, I don't really have a shot. I don't really deserve to show up number one on Google. I might do something on Reddit or try to push YouTube or do some of these other emerging platforms, because some visibility on a lower platform is better than no visibility on Google. So that's like a complicated thing, but you do have to internalize it yourself. Essentially, competition will dictate how successful you can be from an SEO standpoint.
I think another thing that's really interesting to look at is if you go to one of the LLM searches and start with a broad question, like to use the example of I'm looking to hire a DUI lawyer. If you make that prompt into an LLM and ask it to help you make that decision, it's going to come back with some questions for you that help it further refine the recommendation it's going to make. And we call that prompt inversion, because instead of you asking the engine a question, it's asking you a question to refine. So if you figure out what the prompt inversions are, that can give you a really interesting sense of the types of content you should be creating, because maybe one of those inverted prompts is actually surfaces something that's a really interesting niche for your business that's underserved by other businesses.
Let's see. Jelena asks, how should we handle fake reviews that inevitably get published? Since Google Business Profile support is often unreliable, these reviews can negatively impact the business.
Couple things here. Number one, try not to freak out, which is hard, but essentially Google does a pretty bad job of this. So know that it's impacting everyone. We should run a poll at this point, like who's been contacted by, an upset customer saying, hey, if you pay me, I'll take my bad review down. None of this stuff should happen, but it does. Generally, it does impact all businesses. The average business that we talk to is struggling with fake reviews. So knowing that everyone's in the same kind of position makes it a little bit easier to stomach. In terms of what to tactically do when this impacts your business, number one is report these reviews. It's exhausting. So you generally have to report a fake review to Google, wait 3 to 5 days. Then you get to, take that fake review over to the GBP forums, try to get it escalated through a product expert. That will generally fail. And you can reapply it, to get those done. So it's a pretty awful, thing to actually work through in terms of handling fake reviews and getting them removed. I still think that you should do it. Your online reputation is so important that going through all of that hassle is, generally speaking, worth it. The easiest thing to do is not freak out when it comes to getting a negative review, and essentially try to have an avalanche of positive reviews coming in that will essentially bury it. that's the best way to handle fake reviews, is make sure that you have real, great reviews that drown out any type of, unsubstantiated attack against your business.
Right. Question from Anna. If a business serves multiple locations, would you have a location page for each of those service areas?
Yeah. So for the most part, yes. If you service multiple locations, potentially, and this is like really niche, the general answer to this question is yes, just hard yes. There are a couple weird niche, like individual things, like if you only, if you're in Houston, you don't really serve any other city, and it's just really different sections of like Houston. Potentially, you might want to not have a single page, just have one page that talks to, like, we handle different little like zip codes or neighborhoods in Houston. But for the most part, by and large, if you do service multiple locations, number one, hopefully you have multiple locations. You can get multiple pins on Google Maps, and proximity matters an awful lot to ranking. By having those individualized pages, that will actually help you get listings. Plus, you'll be more relevant, hopefully, in those different service areas to talk about different jobs. So like if you do roofing in Maine and you do roofing in Arizona, the people in Maine are going to care about snow on their roofs, wherein people in Arizona are going to care about how many solar panels can I actually get installed on these types of roofing. So the content and what's needed to talk to those communities is extremely different. That's why having multiple location pages to talk about different service areas and how they differ is just generally speaking a good idea.
Ann asks, do you have any recommended tools to track AI optimizations in one place?
Yeah. So this is essentially, said another way, AI optimization and just SEO, right, is kind of one and the same. A big part of what I meant to go through here is like, what else is changing? It's not a lot. You still need a web page. You still need to get reviews. You still need to do all of those things. So for the most part, what I wouldn't say is, do you have a tool to track AI optimization in one place? You should have SEO tools already in place. A lot of those are tracking AI optimizations. The thing you need to layer onto your current tech stack is, how do I track how my brand shows up and the sentiment when it does show up in AI search platforms? So that's really how I would change that question. You still need to monitor your technical SEO. You still need to monitor reviews and ratings. You need all of that stuff. But as a business, do I know in what AI search platforms we show up? And when we show up, are we mentioned positively or negatively? That's the thing that I would be looking to inject. And if you don't have the answer to that, Google, how do I track my AI, search inclusion, something along those lines.
Yeah, there are some commercial platforms that are explicitly designed for tracking how brands show up in the LLMs. Tools like Profound or Athena HQ are a couple that come to mind. There's also a tool from HubSpot called the AI Search Grader, I think. Last I checked, it was freely available to just give you kind of a cursory overview of brand sentiment and how you're showing up in the LLM. So that's a good way to do a quick check at no cost.
All right. I think we got time for one more question, and then we're going to close this out. Catherine asks, for multi-location brands, how do you ensure consistency at scale without losing local authenticity?
Sure. So the best way to do this, and generally multi-location brands will fight this, is you decentralize the management of this data, and you use technology in a way to do that. So what I mean by that is, no one is going to understand what the details of a store or a service area are more than that local manager. If you let the local manager manage that information, as well as produce contact and things along those lines, you will be way more likely to be consistent as well as authentic. Most multi-location brands don't want to do that, and will essentially pull that together from a from a management standpoint, it's difficult to understand who's working and turnover and staffing and all that stuff. So from that standpoint, managing consistency is about having an underlying platform to do that. And the local authenticity is making sure that escalated problems still get a local touch.
And that puts us at about the end of the webinar. Actually, we're 1 minute over. So I'm going to take a quick second and just thank everybody for joining us for today. Stick around for that short survey. But real quick, before we let you go, Kyle, Robert, any last comments you want to leave everybody with, and tell the people where to find you?
Sure. Robert, you want to go first?
Just want to thank everyone for showing up and bringing these great questions. Really enjoyed the discussion. So appreciate that.
Yeah, no, echo what Robert said. The last thing I would just leave you with is don't panic on all of this stuff. The average thing I'm telling people for what to do with AI is a lot of what you've been doing. You should have cared about a lot of the things we've said already. So don't wildly pivot your business related to off anything we've said. It's more stay the track and feel confident that will work long term. And yeah, to get in touch with us, just go to our website. We're dacgroup.com. We'd be happy to help answer any questions or any follow-ups, stuff like that.
Awesome. All right, Kyle, Robert, thank you so much for sharing all this information. Thank you, everybody, for hanging out with us for this hour. Stick around for that survey, and we'll see you on the next SEJ webinar. Have a great day, everybody.
Thanks again.
Cool.
Take care.
Bye.
Bye, guys.